Hello, welcome everybody. You're in the right place if you want to know what to do with the rest of the class. I'm Marnie Ginsberg and this is Reading Simplified, and we are in the middle of a 4-week series here on Facebook Live to answer this question that so many of you guys have had. In fact, it was the number one question I got by far. It was about the only issue I got when I asked you, what is your concern or challenge with juggling guided reading? And it's really a lot less about the guided reading and more about what's going on with the rest of the class. So we're going to talk tonight about how just 3 different markers can help you group your students quickly. Does that sound good? Okay, if you are tuning in, let me know where you are from. Are you from the U.S. or Canada? I want to know. You guys, say hello, please. And let me check to see that everything is going strong. Okay, great. It looks like we are moving. Tell me where you're from, okay? We're going to dive right in to the 3 markers that will help you group your kids quickly so you can get them grouped and then have them do different centers or different stations so their needs are met. And so that they're engaged, so they're on task, so that you don't have to keep being interrupted. That's what we want, right? Okay, awesome. Let me share this and we will get into that. But I want to know where you're from. Say hello, please. Please, please, please. It's good to hear from you guys. Okay, here we go. That's going off there. Okay. So, we're in week 2. Last week I discussed not so much a tip or a strategy. Hi, Danette. I'm so glad to see you. So to speak, see you. Welcome. Last week we discussed not really a tip or a strategy, but how the groundwork or the framework or the foundation must be laid if you want the rest of your kids to be independent, happy, and not off task while you're working with a small group. And the fundamentals of that is that each child should be close to their instructional match while they work independently, whether they're in a center or a literacy station or a workstation. When they're closer to their true instructional match, their brain will be engaged, they'll be intrigued, and they will focus. Or at least that will create this environment that's most likely to happen. So if you don't have everybody doing not everybody, but groups of kids doing slightly different things, then what you probably have is a situation where some kids are finding the work too easy, other kids are finding the work too hard. Both types of kids are prone to getting off task, right? They're prone to having maybe on this side frustration or the other side boredom. And either way, they're going to not do their best for the task, and they're going to bother their neighbor, and they're going to interrupt you. So we don't want that, partly because you need to get the best time out of that small group reading instruction or the guided reading, but also so that that independent time can really be well used. That time is not babysitting time. Kids can make progress with that time, but they're not going to make as much progress, and they'll make a lot less, frankly, if they are doing something that everybody's doing simultaneously at the same time, or it's the level that everybody is at. So, for instance, your reading program may tell you, let's do CVC words focusing on 3 short vowels, okay? And, excuse me, got hair in my face. So you set up a cool activity where it's really fun, and they go off to that center, and everybody, when they get to that center or their station, they do the CVC manipulation. And it's colorful, and it's fun, and you're frustrated when they turn to you and they bother you, or they interrupt, or they don't do the center right. Well, that is most likely because most of your kids, I shouldn't say most, many of your kids don't need CVC instruction. Some of your kids still don't know how to blend or manipulate or segment CVC words. So you've got 2 different types of kiddos where that is outside of their instructional match. And therefore, you will perpetually be coming into problems with them. Kathy, I'm glad you're here from PA, Pennsylvania. I used to live there. If you are just coming in, welcome. Let me know where you're from. We're talking about what to do with the rest of the class, and today I'm reviewing what we went through last week briefly, and then I'm going to move to the 3 markers that can help you group your kids. I'm having trouble with this reverse stuff. Group your kids quickly. I wonder if it was that hard for Vanna when she turned. Probably not, because the camera wasn't. We'll see. I don't know. So, in addition to tell me where you're from, I'd also love to hear when your kids go out independently, are they doing the same thing or different things? So, write in the chat either same or different. When kids are going off and doing independent work for centers or literacy stations or whatever you call it, is it same for everyone or is it different? I'd love to hear from you. Okay, Donnie from New York City, awesome, and Janet, welcome from Illinois, just down the road. I'm glad you're popping in here, Janet. Let me know, is it same? Okay, Donnie, awesome. You are planning literacy centers that are different. Awesome. Then today's talk will be going with the flow, and hopefully this way of sorting will make sense to you. And Susanna, awesome. Different because you're doing the daily 5. Great. Sometimes people do the daily 5 and everyone does the same center. So that's good to hear, Susanna. Great, Janet. You guys are just, this is going to be easy peasy for you now. But if you're already doing the same thing, that's very common. In fact, I find it's most common in the U.S. at least right now. So never fear. I'm going to show you in this series how to move from everybody doing the same thing to everybody doing well, not everybody, but groups of kids doing something different. Okay, so awesome. If you haven't popped in and told me yet whether or not your centers are same or different, let me know. Does everybody do the same thing? Press center, same. Or does everybody do something slightly different? Or do groups of kids do something different? Type get different, please. Okay, so what are those 3 markers that help you group your kids? Well, if you are working with kids who are reading at the K through late 1st grade level, then the 3 markers that I want you to look at are nonsense word reading, phonemic segmentation, and letter sound knowledge. Okay, I have talked about these before in another Facebook Live and on blog posts, but I just want to review it and connect it with how we sort. Okay, so if you, in other words, any kid who is reading at that lower end of the developmental continuum, kindergarten or early to mid 1st grade, you want to particularly focus on nonsense word reading, what they're scoring on that type test, phonemic segmentation, and letter sound knowledge. So we're going to take that information and we're going to put it on a Post-it note. So here's Xavier's. His nonsense word reading is like a 12 out of 12. His phonemic segmentation is like a 34 out of 36. And his letter sound knowledge is he knows all of the basic sounds, consonants, short vowels, and some digraphs. So we're going to start working with this. Those 3 markers are not what you typically hear, are they? Many of you may be grouping based on their level of book. How many of you are doing that? Leveling kids in groups by the level of the book they're at. Are they at an A? Are they at a D? Are they at an L? Type leveling if that's the way you are grouping your kids. That's the most common thing that I find, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but I'm going to suggest an alternative plan. So there's no shame in saying that, but it's good to say what is it that you are doing. And of course, I'm just recommending my suggestions here tonight. Are you leveling groups mostly based on levels? Let me know. Type level or leveling. And then some people are using the Dibbles or Aimsweb, and they're coming up with something pretty similar to this. So, but then what they emphasize with those tests sometimes would be slightly different from what I'm going to recommend. Okay. Oh, Janet, you're co-teaching. Cool. I didn't realize that. And so you are using the leveling system, and you wish to switch from just leveled to readers groups to something different, Donnie. Cool. Great. What about the rest of you? Are you using leveling or like leveled books? Like everybody who is a D works with you in guided reading as a level D, and then they go off and do a center and they do level D stuff? That's still differentiated. There's a lot of power in that, but I'm going to recommend something that's a little faster for in the long run. Or some of you are using, like I said, the Dibbles or the Aimsweb. Let me know if you're using that. Just type Dibbles or Aims, and that will help me understand what we've got here. Okay, Susanna, thank you for doing that. Leveling. Yeah, it's so common. I'm going to suggest to you guys that it works mostly, but I think this system will get you kids faster along the pathway. The leveling system is kind of like an outcome measure. How is the student able to read, considering all the reading sub-processes together at the same time right now? It's kind of like taking the thermometer and finding out, oh, this patient is sick. But when you get that thermometer reading, you don't know when they're sick what's the source of the sickness, right? If you were the doctor and you found out a patient had a fever, you wouldn't want to just then go immediately to diagnosis, would you? Because somebody might have gangrene and a leg that's about to fall off, and some people might have an ear infection and they need a very, very different treatment, don't they? Okay, Danette used Ames until last year. Good. Okay, so that might not be too far off of what I'm suggesting, Danette. That may make some sense. So that the leveling of comprehension, any kind of comprehension test or a leveled book, it doesn't show you the nuances of the reading process. And really, the reading process is built on the foundation of strong sound symbol decoding. So what can happen is that some kids may have weak sound symbol decoding and stuff slips through the cracks and they don't have the firm foundation that they need. They could actually be reading, say, like a level F because they have hundreds of sight words memorized. But when they attack an unknown word, their system isn't surefire and they falter. And so what happens is they start to slow down and they're ramping up as a reader. And they may even get to a point where they hit a brick wall. That's what I have seen most often as a reading tutor. I get kids who are second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and their parents say, well, they were doing well at first because they had good sight word memories. But then now they're having trouble. Maybe it's because they just reached a cap of how many words they can memorize with a visual system only. Or maybe it's because the multi-syllable words are so hard because they really don't understand how sounds and symbols work together. So that's one reason I don't want to group by leveled book level. It's kind of redundant, sorry. I don't want to group by leveled book because some level Fs will have a strong decoding system and some will have a weak, and their needs are very different. And most often what I find is that there's a lot of kids who we think are doing just fine in kindergarten and first grade because their memories are so strong. They're moving right along with memorizing words and the way they look. But if they didn't get that foundation, then something's going to start to crack along the way. You may not see it as the kindergarten teacher. You may not see it as the first grade teacher. You may not even see it as the second grade teacher. But somewhere in third or fourth grade, it will pop up as a problem for that child. So that's why I recommend these 3 tests. Okay, so if you don't have access to the information I was talking about, nonsense word reading, phonemic segmentation ability, and just plain old letter sound knowledge, well, I'm sure you probably have something like that, then you can get a free informal assessment that I created at the link above, readingsimplified.com/reading-tests. So here is an example of a nonsense word page. Why is this so important? Because you can't have memorized this. You have to attack it with a sound symbol approach, left to right blending, knowing what each sound is. And this will reveal whether a student is using a sound symbol approach and can they do something tricky like splist or stract. If they can't, and they're well into the E, F, D, G, H reading levels, then that is a cue to you that you've got to go back and shore up that foundation. So that's why this is so important. It shows whether the student can blend, and it shows if they're understanding how our code works together. And I just want you to give this a try because every time I test a kid, if they're struggling at all, this is where their first breakdown is. It may not be their only breakdown, but it's their first and foundational. Okay? So that is the nonsense word reading. And so that one on mine happens to be a total of of 12 points that you can get, up to 12. Again, it's not standardized or normed, it's just informal. So you can just use it to compare your kids. Then the phoneme segmentation test is simply giving a word to a child orally and seeing if they can segment it. How many of you have done these types of tests, given phoneme segmentation? Say, type PS if you have given phoneme segmentation tests. Let me say an example. Okay, so I've got the word sit. Okay, Johnny, tell me the sounds that you hear in sit. And Johnny should say sit. Or an even harder one like blink. B-l-i-n-k. That's pretty hard, okay? Danette says, you have experienced the first and second grade gap. You worked with upper first grade graders last year with high sight words, but now they're struggling readers because they don't have the phonics. Yes. Okay, Danette, so you have given that phonemic segmentation test. Great. Anybody else given that? Does that make sense to you guys? That's the second test I recommend giving. And then finally, probably everybody is given some form of letter sound knowledge. That's just putting this in front of the student and covering up parts so they don't get overwhelmed, but letting them see it and see if they can recognize the sound, not the letter name, okay, because the sounds are going to be what correlates to their decoding. Okay, so give something like that. Now, if you give the Aimsweb or the Dibbles already, then just kind of take that information and do what I'm recommending if you want to try these approaches. So give everybody those tests. If you got the early first graders or the early kindergartners, and in a minute, if you can hang on, I'll tell you what to do with the older kids or the older readers, because it's really about reading level, not age or grade. Then this is the easiest way for me, because charts, this can just get complicated because you don't know exactly how you're going to group everybody, and it varies so much based on your kids. So I would create little Post-it notes for each child. So this was Xavier's nonsense word score, 12 out of 12. So that's pretty good. And this is the main thing that I'm going to be sorting by. So I'll first sort by nonsense word. Okay, so let's see. I know that this is one of my best scores looking at what I've got. And so I'm going to put him in group 5. This would be my highest group. Of course, that's not information that I tell my students, but okay. And then I've got Jasmine. She's a nonsense word reader with 10 out of 12. So that's still pretty good. Phonemic segmentation of 32 out of 36, still pretty good, but she has all her letter sounds. So I've got 2 here that are nonsense words of 10, so I'm going to put them in group 4. Because nonsense words really are driving my main way of sorting them initially. Then if I need to recalibrate, I can look at the second and third tests. Okay, so Penny's nonsense words is like 9. Phonemic segmentation of 30 and letter sound knowledge of 22 out of 23. And so we're going to put her, I think we'll put her here. And Maria's is 7, 22, and she knows all her letter sounds. And then Bobby was able to blend and read just 4 letter sound or 4 words out of the 12. So we're going to put him there. So all of this was made up data, so I didn't do a whole class. But basically, you see how this can start to form pretty quickly for you. And so if I got a category with, say, 5 kids, and I wanted to keep, or 6 kids, and I didn't want maybe a lower group to have 6 kids, I might shuffle kids around based on their letter sound knowledge or their phonemic segmentation. So it kind of is there's no hard and fast rule about where you need to put people, but the blending, which happens in the nonsense word reading, and the phonemic segmentation, they're the strongest signs that the student is developing a sound symbol way of processing the code. In other words, that's the best indicator that they'll be able to move up in the code quickly. Letter sounds can be kind of quirky. They are like high frequency sight words. Some kids can know a lot of letter sounds and not be able to blend. Some kids may know not so many letter sounds, but they can blend. So really the blending and the phonemic segmentation in general are the main points that you want to think about as you start to sort and move kids around based on whether you want 4 or 5 kids in each group. Now, personally, I would recommend that the weakest readers would have the smallest number of kids. How many of you do that? Do you put smallest numbers in your lower groups? How many do you like to have in your lowest group? Give me a number. What number do you aim for? I would try to aim for 3, maybe 4. Depends, of course, on your whole load. What is your number that you aim for within a group? I'd love to hear from you guys. And after we talk about this, we'll talk about how then you would then push them off into doing their independent work. Okay, I'm going to 3 to 4, Donnie. Yeah, that's what I would aim for, too. But again, if you have a heavy load, sometimes that's not doable. So I'm going to try to share some with Colleen. Yes, 3 or 4. We got a lot of those. April, you've got to do 4 sometimes. Okay, understandable. Thanks for sharing, you guys. Okay, so this is a Streamline Pathway for first grade, but I want to show you the second grade. I'm sorry, first grade is what I meant to say. Let's see, how does that look? All right, I'm going to get rid of this too. I can remember how. There. How many of you have seen this Streamline Pathway before? Because I know some of you may or may not have any idea where this is coming from. Basically, this Streamline Pathway is just like it says, it's a path to getting kids from not being readers down here to being strong readers and fluent. This is all that it takes. These are the phonemic awareness, decoding, phonics, high-frequency word skills that you need in general to move that kids along. So that Streamline Pathway, yes, Janet, I know you have. This Streamline Pathway helps me decide what to do with these groups, okay? And that's how I get them to be at their instructional match. I get them to do something that they're engaged with, and I get them to do an activity that repeats itself over and over again, but with different levels of words and text. We're going to talk next week about how to do that. Anybody else seen the Streamline Pathway before? Okay, so I got to explain a little bit about it. So down here at level 1, you would be teaching these letter sounds that you see here in gray. Short A, short I, and some high frequency consonants like M, T, P, S, and so forth, including some consonant diagraphs. And then on the right would be these high frequency words that relate to those short vowels. Danette, yes, thank you. You guys are both in the Reading Simplified Academy, so you're pros. Danette, you're trying to get in to be a pro, aren't you? We've been having some technical difficulties on my end. So you take your group here, group 1, and you think about them being on this step 1 probably, because they have some serious blending issues, say, particularly if you're late kindergarten or early first grade, you really want to work on that. So those kiddos, that group would be, you bet, Janet, you get those kiddos to do activities, only a handful of them that we teach at Reading Simplified, that's how we save you time, with you, but then also they go out into centers and they do activities that are level 1 activities. Okay, is that making some sense broadly? Now, this group with Maria with 7 nonsense words and all of her letter sounds, well, she would probably be closer to up here at level 4 or maybe level 3 if it's the beginning of the school year. We can review her short vowels and make sure she gets better at blending and segmenting and manipulating 3-sound words. But she would be doing similar activities, switch it and read it, but she would be working with a larger set of letter sounds, and she'd be moving more quickly into advanced phonics. Now, if you've never heard me talk about switch it or read it, I talk about them a lot because they are 2 of the 3 core activities that we teach here at Reading Simplified. That's pretty much all it takes to get kids becoming good decoders and solving a lot of their reading problems. And so if you want to learn more about that, go to readingsimplified.com and click on the Start Here button, and you can learn about Switch It and Read It. So those kids would be doing Switch It and Read It with you, and then they could do related activities at a center, and it could even be the same center, but some kids are going to pick the materials for short A, and some kids are going to pick the materials for short A, I, U, E, and O. Okay? Now this young lady, she also is probably going to be at around a level 4, and so that's how I put her and her group. And group 4, this is really pretty good nonsense word reading. and good at every other area. So after a little switch it to make sure she's got a strong sound symbol decoding base, then I would start her at level 5, learning the O sound, all of its spellings in high frequency O words. And she would be doing, in her group, I should say, it's not so much her, Jasmine, Archer, and their whole group, they would be doing sorted activities and reading advanced phonics books and texts with this O, this level right here, the O sound. And then when they go to centers, they would pick a center that relates to the sorted activity, and they would pick O things. So this is all related to, number 1, getting them at their instructional match. Number 2, getting them to progress rapidly up this continuum or this streamline pathway, because you can do each of these levels in about a week or 2 weeks with typically developing kids. So the next group 5, probably they've already done O, and they're going to be in E, level 6, or in A, level 7. So you use the Streamline Pathway to move kids up. Donnie says, read to each other, Literacy Center. Using this non-leveled grouping, will it work, being that they may be at different reading levels? Ah, that is a great question. You can, there's a lot of different things that you can do with that. So I would take your kiddos and see what strengths and weaknesses you have, because that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Say this group right here, Jasmine and Archer, they have the same nonsense word reading ability. You can't see them. I'll show you over here. She's bringing up a great point. Thank you, Donnie. So they have the same score for nonsense word reading, but let's say Jasmine knows 100 high-frequency sight words and Archer knows 25. So their decoding skills may be somewhat comparable, but she's maybe had more exposure to text, or maybe she has a great visual sight word memory. So she's going to be reading at higher levels if you do a leveling system. And reading in general will be easier. So personally, I would try to pair them and have her listen to Archer read first. So he gets the rereading practice and gets her support. And then if she is not getting support, maybe she picks a kid, you pick a kid from another category, a group for her, or maybe you get a teaching assistant, or maybe you just get her connected to something to listen to. Like, for instance, the Starfall books are free, and she can listen and correct herself if she is struggling. But that's one way to handle that difference. Now, the leveling system, I just wanted to point out too, with regard to that, that doesn't mean that she shouldn't maybe still be reading level F books if that's how you want to group your kids. So she can still read level F books for independent reading and for other activities. But if you're going to be moving kids along in their decoding rapidly to move them up to fluency and make kids transformed into readers quickly, then looking at their decoding and this sequence of things is probably your best bet. No assistant, Donnie. Yeah, that's a classic, right? Probably then finding buddies, recording them. I will record something on just the voice recorder on a device, and then see if I can get it to some sort of device that the student can listen to repeatedly so as they follow along. And that's one solution if there's no buddy to match for them. But that's a great question. Okay. Yeah. Assistants, what a funny idea. How many of you have an assistant? Type assistant. We want to hear. Are they real, or are they like unicorns? Okay, so that is a quick overview of how to group kids for your group, for your guided reading groups, and then get them to go out and be independent and be more likely to be independent. So I'm going to talk next week about what those groups would look like and how you can do like one center and not recreate the wheel every week, but just vary the materials slightly. You don't want to leave them out of reading to each other. Absolutely. That's right. Okay, so those of you who have older readers or more advanced readers, you might want to know what to do with them. So I recommend something similar. I still want you to do the nonsense word reading. Then I want you to come up with their word identification, just their score of how many words can they recognize in isolation, and then what's their fluency. And so then you sort the kids who are higher up. Maybe they're in the first grade like this. Oops, let's see. Those first grade kids. You would still prioritize nonsense word reading because they're going to be deceiving you with some of them are going to recognize a lot of high frequency sight words and some of them aren't. So this will really cue you into whether that foundation is strong. And if you are working on their foundation of decoding, then these things, word identification and fluency, will fall out of it, or it will just naturally flow out of it. So you would do the same things. Sort Mary, say she has a really high nonsense word, I put her over here, and maybe John has a lower, so I put him there. So the same principle applies, it's just that you might need to use different tests. And again, if you don't have that kind of assessment data, you can go to the same post that's listed above, readingsimplified.com/reading-tests, and snag that. Okay, so I threw a lot at you, especially if you haven't grouped this way. You've been maybe grouping by levels. Hope you will not be. Okay, Donnie, that's a good point. What is the pressure that you have to group them by levels? Is that law, or is it recommended practice? If you do it this way and the kids are reading faster in a few weeks and reading better, will that be kind of your solution to dealing with that difficulty? What should I do for third? Okay, Beth, very good question. Most likely all of your kids, if you have a regular ed classroom, would still use this framework. Start first with nonsense word reading. Get that test. That's there's a free one. It's not standardized, but it is standardized. And it will give you the whether they're strong or weak at nonsense word reading. And that's the main thing that I would group on. That is at readingsimplified.com/reading-tests, Beth. And then the secondary layer would be their word identification score, and that is also on that blog post, and fluency. In fact, in that blog post, I have the order. This is first, this is second, and third. So you primarily group by that. And you'll be really surprised, Beth, I bet. You probably have some kids who are maybe really are at grade level or above grade level, but then they have some holes in their nonsense word reading, and that's going to slow them down. And even if they are able to always succeed and be okay, it's really tamping down their potential. I've had many students this year who have this exact same profile. High word identification, low nonsense word reading. And there's something amiss. The teacher doesn't know what's wrong, the parent doesn't know what's wrong, and the child is slightly frustrated, maybe a lot frustrated, maybe behaving with some ADD behaviors. And usually, in fact, it's 99% of the time in my experience as a reading tutor, it's because of this gap between what they're able to recognize rapidly and how they're really processing sound. So when you bolster this nonsense word reading ability, not because you're going to study nonsense word reading, but you're going to teach them decoding through easy activities like switch it, read it, and sort it. Then this comes up, and then actually this goes up, and fluency goes up, and they are not as frustrated. They're able to read with more ease, and they read more. Okay, which step the word sorts? Okay, good question, Donnie. Now, there's two streamline pathways based on which grade reading level you're at. So right now we're using this one for first grade. So if the students have mastered most of the short vowels, then you would go into advanced phonics and you would do the sorted activity. That's where kids would sort the O sound with its various spellings. Yes, Donnie, absolutely. Switch it, read it, and sort it. Those are things that they can do with you, and then they can do similar activities, which we will talk about in the coming weeks, at centers once you are at their instructional level. Okay, Donnie, I will switch to the kindergarten pathway. If most of your kiddos are reading at the kindergarten level, let's give you that one. It's only slightly different because short vowels are more emphasized. So, did I do it? Yes, here we go. Okay, so Donnie, down here, levels 1 through 4, they probably wouldn't have gotten to sort it yet because these are just short vowels. But then if you have kids that already know their short vowels, like these kids who are nonsense word reading of 10 and 12, they must know their short vowels if they're going to be getting all of these words right, like brast, glamp, and strop. So then they would be starting here at level 5, and that's when you would introduce the sorted activity, because sorted is about sorting one sound, in this case O, with all of its spellings. Okay, so Beth, I kind of jumped back to Donnie's question. Did I answer your question? Is there some follow-up that I could help you with? And Donnie, if you have some follow-ups, let me know too. And I will switch over to the first grade, and it really applies to first grade and up for most readers. And I use the same framework more or less with kids of all ages, because if they're struggling with decoding, they still need to go through these same sets of steps, maybe with harder words. So a third grader, Beth, could be working with the O sound for a whole week and doing switch it with short vowel words, and then sort it with the long vowel O sound words. The 3 strategies are meant to be, I'm waiting on you, Donnie, with bated breath. Okay, I've taken a little longer than I had hoped, but you guys have been awesome with participation. If there are any other things from Beth or Donnie or any of you, let me know. And otherwise, we'll wrap up soon. Next week, I'm going to be talking about how you can have one center that's kind of static or constant or consistent, and yet you're still differentiating at that center. So you don't have to recreate the wheel. You don't have to be up every night making this activity for group 1 and this activity for group 2 and this activity for group 3 and running around like a crazy lady. You can have one center that meets everybody's needs for one particular type of reading. For instance, if it was going to be the word work center, maybe on Tuesday you would do X activity, but some kids would get the X activity of level 1, some would get the level 2, and so forth. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I hope that you have already liked this Facebook page here, and also click the down arrow so that you can follow it, and so you'd be more likely to get notifications of when we go live. If you think this could be helpful to some of your colleagues, please tag them or share this, because this, I know, is pretty radical, isn't it? Most of the world is grouping by the level of the book. But I think that that's kind of like putting patients together who all have a fever. And some of them have a fever because of gangrene, and some of them have a fever because of an earache. And doctors wouldn't probably get as far if they tried that approach. That's an extreme. I'm hyperbolizing, but there is some level of truth to that. Okay, Maria, thank you. Donnie, you didn't show. All I had from you, Donnie, I'm sorry, is the 3 strategies are meant to be, and then maybe you wanted me to fill in the blank. My 3 core activities are, by and large, switch it, read it, and sort it. But switch it and read it are for the short vowel level. Sort it is for the advanced phonics level, long vowels and other complex vowels. Okay? Thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to seeing your tags and how you've tagged your friend or how you shared it. And meet me back here on Tuesday so you can hear how centers, and I'll show you some examples of centers so that you can get the concept of how this type of information can help you not only with your small group guided reading, but also help those kids stay engaged and happy during literacy centers and that independent reading time. All right, have a good night.